what she's saying is actually factually untrue. In very simple terms, multiculturalism hasn't failed in Britain. You only have to look at the British government to see, that it's dominated by politicians from ethnic, minority and immigrant backgrounds, and she's one of them. And these are not just tokenistic positions, they are key cabinet positions, well, including the Prime Minister of Indian origin, but also key ministers, the Foreign Secretary, the Business Secretary.
Pragya, I'll start with you. What did you think about this speech from Suella Braveman?
I think that it is just another of her attempt for a polarized political statement. And I was concerned about the statement because, first of all, it is not backed by evidence. Secondly, it feeds into the right-wing nationalistic ideologies of Great Replacement, which proposes that the myth that proposes that the white population, so-called the British white population, would be replaced by the ethnic minorities because they are coming in and changing the way of life here and are having more births, because she said that the rate of birth by non-UK born mothers is rising, which is actually a flawed statement if you look at the data. So I feel like implicitly there is an attempt here to incite polarization, further polarization and divisions in the community and society here, and also an incitement of discrimination and prejudice against those who are perceived to be non-British, non-white, foreign-born.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So you've given us your assessment of the speech. Rakib, what was your reaction to this?
Well, I think parts of the speech I'd say I actually agreed with. Some parts of the speech, I think she could have been far more positive about the state of community relations in the UK. And there were some elements of the speech, to be quite honest, I found to be bizarre. I think that in terms of integration, I think there are areas of Leicester, Bradford, even London, Birmingham, Manchester, where there should be robust integration policies in place. And I think that in cities such as Leicester and Bradford, there perhaps has been an institutional promotion or hyper promotion of particularism and difference, a largely uncritical view of diversity without acknowledging the complications of it. But saying that, I still think that Britain is a relatively successful multiracial democracy, certainly more so than other countries such as France, Germany, and the United States. But I think the real worry I had with the speech, Ayesha, were the parts about asylum policy, where she talked about that it's not enough to be granted refugee status just because you're fearful of discrimination as a woman or as a gay person. And I think that the one thing that I've talked about is that we should provide sanctuary for women and girls who are at major risk of sexual violence in their homelands, conflict-affected territories where rape is very much a weapon of war. And in terms of talking about gay people, I'd make the point that only 1.5% of asylum claims have sexual orientation as part of it. So really, it's just creating a red herring. And I think I was somewhat uncomfortable with parts of the speech referring to foreign-born mothers, because there's actually survey data which shows that it's actually first-generation migrants who have the most positive orientations towards British democracy, because in their country of origin they may have experienced civil unrest, social instability, and very strong forms of institutional corruption.
Really, really interesting. And also, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like there was quite a lot in this speech. I mean, some of it was, whatever your views are about multiculturalism, some interesting points about multiculturalism. But then there were other bits of the speech which were clearly kind of red meat on this very political issue about asylum. And there were other parts of the speech which were very much, is this a potential leadership? Is this pitch ruling for a potential leadership? So this speech was there was a lot in this, wasn't there? Now we'll come back to some of the details, but Nabila, as somebody who, you cover this in France a lot, you were on my show a couple of weeks ago making some really interesting points. What was your reaction to this?
Well, first of all, I have to say that Braverman's speech was straight out of the Hardline playbook, which portrays immigrants as an underclass who will destroy civilized societies. And it's the kind of discourse that has been going on for centuries, especially during periods of extreme tension when extreme nationalists are looking for an enemy to blame for all of society's ill. And remember that Braverman is a politician who has described all immigrants arriving in small boats as being part of an invasion. So again, this is the kind of language which is specifically aimed at demonizing rather than just dealing with a very complicated issue. Nobody denies that immigration is a complex problem. It's one of the biggest global issues of our age. But I think Braverman's analysis is always manipulative and indeed dishonest. She fails, for example, to mention recent wars involving the West that causes so much immigration. For example, look at the way the British and the French destroyed Libya as a functioning country. Now that results in immigration. So if the UK's, dare I say, poisonous Home Secretary wants to know why there are so many legitimate refugees in the world, she should visit Libya. Okay. And instead of conceding that failed wars in Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and less overtly in Syria, for example, create millions of legitimate refugees, she moved to demonize those fleeing to safer parts of the world.
Okay. I mean, she has a very strong view on immigration. I mean, a lot of people do agree with her. I mean, I spoke, for example, to a conservative grassroots activist earlier in the show who actually said, I really like what she's saying on immigration. And, you know, if the Conservative Party lose the next election, I would actually quite like to see somebody like Suella Braveman lead the Conservative Party. So there's, you know, she has a base that she's definitely playing to within the party that do, not just the party, there may well be people in the country who actually quite like what she's saying.
Yeah, but that's if you do not believe in fact, because what she's saying is actually factually untrue. In very simple terms, multiculturalism hasn't failed in Britain. You only have to look at the British government to see, that it's dominated by politicians from ethnic, minority and immigrant backgrounds, and she's one of them. And these are not just tokenistic positions, they are key cabinet positions, well, including the Prime Minister of Indian origin, but also key ministers, the Foreign Secretary, the Business Secretary. The Scottish First Minister is a Muslim, the Mayor of London is a Muslim. In fact, there are more ethnic minority politicians in high office